Hi, I'm Jill Vitale-Awesome with the Eden Alternative. Thanks for joining us today for the Eden Alternative Live. We are really excited to have Matt Pierce here with us from Immediate. And Immediate is our newest Eden Alternative value-added partner. And for those of you who don't know what a value-added partner is, those are organizations that align with the culture and the mission of the Eden Alternative, and that we believe bring significant value to the organizations and communities that we work with. So we're going to be talking today about supporting team member financial well-being, which Matt knows this more than anyone with the work that they do, but there's an estimate that I think it's 78%, right, Matt, of people live paycheck to paycheck. And that's always challenging. And right now, during this crisis that our world is in, it's even harder for people because, people need to go to the grocery store when they can to get supplies, and waiting for their paycheck to come in just doesn't work. So, Matt, thank you for being here. We're going to have a big discussion about this. I want to let people know, if you're watching, that Immediate, what we're going to be talking a lot about is the senior living field and aging services, but Immediate works with all different kinds of organizations in different sectors. So, Matt, tell everybody a little bit about you and your organization.
Jill, first off, thank you so much for having us here today. We really appreciate it, and are thrilled to be able to share a little bit more about what we're doing. To your point, not only during the normal course of life, but also in the midst of a pandemic, what we can do to help. So a little quick background on me personally and kind of where the company came from. My background is in healthcare technology. My dad's a doctor. I grew up thinking I wanted to be a doctor, and got to college, and chemistry did not come as well to me as I'd hoped it would. And so I quickly shifted mindset and ended up going and working at a hospital a couple summers as an intern, and learned pretty quickly that, man, there's a lot of, without having to go out and actually provide medicine, right, to take care of patients, there's a lot of ways you can impact people's lives. And so kind of started to move towards a healthcare administration degree, and ended up getting a job with a company that was in the healthcare technology space, where I could go out and sell software to doctors, electronic health records, and did that for right at a decade with a company in Atlanta called Greenway. And we just had an awesome ride and a great experience. And my role there was to manage our business partnerships. And I learned pretty quickly how impactful one, having a really solid software solution in the healthcare space could impact people and help provide more efficient healthcare delivery. But two, how taking that and then layering on third-party value-added services could just really exponentially increase the services you create. And so along the way, we got to a chance to partner with a company in Atlanta called Wellcentive, and I actually started to be mentored by one of their founders, who is today one of my co-founders. So it's been a really cool turn of events where I started, just calling this guy up and picking his brain. And then he kind of turned the corner to a few years later, where we were having lunch one day, and he said, we should start a business together. And so that's kind of what led us to starting Immediate. And initially, we didn't start as a financial wellness platform. We had both had some experiences with in-home care delivery where we kind of felt in the dark. The example for me was, I got a phone call one day from my grandmother, who lived about 2 hours away from me, and this was in early 2017. And she said, "Hey, I hate to bother you, but it's almost lunchtime, and so hasn't showed up yet today, and I'm still laying in bed." And she wasn't too bad off, but she just didn't feel comfortable getting up and moving around. She'd had a stroke. She lost her peripheral vision. Mm-hmm. And she said, "I just don't feel comfortable getting up and trying to move around the house without my help here." And so I, of course, hung up and called her neighbor, and he was super helpful and went over there and took care of her and got her going for the day. And I just remember after kind of the commotion settled down, how was it 2017? And I can't, I can get a notification when an Uber is 2 minutes from my house, or I can get a text message when, Shipt or Instacart drops my groceries off on the front doorstep. But I can't get notified when somebody does or doesn't show up at my parents' house, my grandparents' house. And that to me was kind of one of those pivotal moments of there's got to be a better way.
Mm-hmm.
And so we set out to build a caregiver transparency platform. And fast forward about a year where we started to scale this business and started to go, we had some small organizations that were working with this, and we started to go out and talk to bigger groups in the post-acute home health, home care, hospice setting. And I remember the conversation with an organization that has about 1,000 caregivers, where the lady looked at me and said, "Matt, this is really nice, but you're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem." And I said, "Well, tell me more. We're here to help. What can we do to help?" And she said, "Well, the problem is I have 60% turnover every year, and I have a really difficult time keeping people engaged." And she said, and I can't afford to pay a whole lot more, because that means I have to push up my prices on the back end, which makes it cost prohibitive for you as a family member. And so she said, I have this balance of how do I provide a great service to my care recipients and their family members, but also how do I run a business that's profitable and is here to support them in the long run? And she said, I quite frankly need to figure out a way to incentivize my people monetarily while not impacting my bottom line. And then I said, well, that's interesting. And I said, how do you do that? And she goes, this is where I end and you begin. You got to go figure that out for yourself. And that was where we really sat down and said, if we're going to create something that is as impactful as possible, we don't need to focus just on 30,000 home care agencies in the U.S. We need to be building a platform that transcends industry. It transcends, regions, and this is where we kind of settled on identifying what was such a big issue, to the stat that you gave at the beginning of 4 out of 5 people living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. So Matt, thank you. So knowing that, and I love, I think, and we're going to talk a little bit more about leadership today. For everybody who's watching, we encourage you to put in any comments or questions. I've really enjoyed getting to know Matt, and he's a big thinker, a lot of leadership philosophy, and so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I love how your leadership, sometimes people are like, well, this is what we set out to do, and this is what we will do, and that you had that flexibility to meet the needs of the people that you're trying to support. So knowing the general stress of people living paycheck to paycheck, what are you seeing? What's the impact of the pandemic and what's happening? How is that making it harder for people? And thinking about a lot of the people that work in nursing homes, senior living settings, home care companies, who a lot of times, because of the situation that we've always been in, they're not making a lot of money. They're working, more than one job. How is this situation making it even harder for people right now? Like, what should we know?
It really has put a spotlight on this issue, right? We've seen across the board at our company over the past 2 months about a 40% increase in usage of the immediate platform and delivering on demand, early access pay. And so when you look at the impact that it's having, I think the number recently surpassed 25 million of people who have filed for unemployment over the past 6 weeks. That takes if 4 out of 5 are living paycheck to paycheck, even if 4 out of 5 of those 25 million are the ones who were let go. That's a lot of people that were living paycheck to paycheck and now have no income. And then you take it a step further. There was a study done a few years ago that said 46% of our population has less than $400 in savings. So when you put these things together, it really is a perfect storm of financial issues in this country. And so it really has put a spotlight on the needs of so many Americans. It's 254 million people that are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's a major issue, and even when I think we're starting to see the curve flattened, right? Like I think a lot of states have started to put in place processes and kind of slow reopening plans. Well, when we fast forward out 2, 3, 6, 12 months, there's still going to be a trickle. There's still going to be issues. There's a lot of restaurants that unfortunately will not reopen when this is over. There's not just restaurants, there's a lot of businesses in general. There's companies that are furloughing, that are laying people off. There's an organization that we were talking to earlier this week that had they made a really difficult decision to go in and reduce pay across the board, 2,500 employees, and reduce pay by 20% until they pull through the other side of this. It's a major issue and concern.
Yeah, it is. One of the things, we had Tony Cachito from Ecligo Workforce Solutions on our show on Monday, and we were talking about in this horrible time, and it's not, you don't want to sound opportunistic, right? But there are people who need jobs right now. All the people that you just explained who've lost their jobs from restaurants and the hospitality field and all these different fields. And the senior living field has been in a staffing crisis since before this started. And so there is an opportunity right now to attract people who normally might not have thought about this field as a career path. So Ecligo was talking about some of the ways to recruit people. What I really love, and I don't think we've really, I'm gonna talk about the way I perceive what you all do, and then you tell me if I'm wrong. But so I was a nursing home administrator for a lot of years, and one of the things that would happen a lot is I would have team members who would come and say, my utilities just got shut off. I have this unexpected car expense. Can I get an advance on my paycheck? Which is a big, it's quite a process to do that. It's also a little bit risky for an organization to do that. I'm not asking you to speak to this, but if they go down the street to like a payday loan place, it costs a lot of money. So I would sometimes just be like, listen, here's money. Don't tell anybody, because I felt so awful, that they were in this situation. They had earned their money by working 1 shift or 5 shifts or whatever it was. So they'd earned the money and they still couldn't get it. And so when I learned about what you all do, which basically, and tell the audience if I'm getting this wrong, basically, once somebody works their shift, they can get paid. They can get their money. They have access to it, right?
That's exactly right. And it's what's part of what I love about this is the simplicity of it. It doesn't take a lot of explaining for somebody to get it. So you hit the nail on the head. You have access to your earned pay prior to payday. And it costs, and I wish that you all were around back when I was running a community, but it costs the organization nothing. Is that correct? Correct.
And how much does it cost the employee?
So for our users, we charge what we call an early access fee, and it's never more than $3 per transaction. You can kind of think of it as an ATM fee. And we even give our users the ability to work towards free transactions. So once you've used the system a certain number of times, you can kind of work towards free transactions.
Oh, that's great. I didn't even know that. And you're doing something special right now, right, to help. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So as part of, Jill, you said something that really resonated with me. Is during a time like this, you don't want to be looked at and viewed as being overly opportunistic or vulturistic, right? And I struggled with that. And it's been one thing that's been really good for me as an entrepreneur to have people that are smarter than me and more experienced than me that I have in my circle that are investors, advisors, mentors that I can pick up the phone and call. And in early March, when we started to see this path we were headed down, I picked up the phone and started calling some people. And who is one of my co-founders, and the guy I mentioned earlier, a mentor of mine, I called and I said, how do we balance continuing to try to grow a business in the midst of a pandemic and not look like we're out trying to twist people's arms and get locked into something? And it just feels kind of weird, right? And so it is a struggle. And I think there's a lot of organizations struggling with this in general. And his response was, Matt, if you were going door to door and selling face masks or going out and saying, hey, I know people are going to be home more, so I'm going to go sell TVs at a 40% markup door to door. That's being a vulture.
Yeah.
You are not being a vulture. You are offering a service that's going to impact people. And I said, well, how could we make it even more clear? And he said, do it for free. And as a business owner, you kind of go, that means we've got cost and overhead and staff and all those things, and we're going to go to zero in revenue for a period of time. But the goodwill and quite frankly, the impact we can have on that is more important to me than the dollars to the bottom line. And so we made a decision with our existing customer base in March to go to them and let them know that we were going to waive all of our fees, end user fees, for the foreseeable future. And then we made the decision to take it a step further in April. Was anybody who partners with us moving forward during the pandemic, and that initially was through the end of April. As we shared, we will extend that for anybody that's part of the Eden Alternative. We decided that we wanted to offer 60 days of fee-free transactions for anyone who partners with us during this, because we know all the things we just talked about lead to financial instability. Yeah. And if we're touting ourselves as a financial wellness platform, how could we not go out and say, let's help people improve the stability of their finances? That right now, when there's so much shakiness and so much uncertainty in the world around us, how can we be one thing that makes it normal, right? If you've earned money and you need to pay a bill to keep your lights on, or you're having to pay a little bit extra to have somebody go pick up your groceries and deliver them to your house so you don't have to go out and run the risk of getting sick when you've been working in a community all week long, and you just want to go kick up your feet and say, I want somebody else to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
And help.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I just want people to know, like, Immediate didn't come to the Eden Alternative. I heard about Immediate because I was on an administrator Facebook page, and one of your customers said, hey, if you all don't know about Immediate, this is what they do. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I tracked down Matt and said, tell me more about what you do. I think this can be a really good thing for the organizations that we work with. So I don't think you have to worry. I think the very thing that you're doing, the people who need money before payday are going to have to either get it somewhere, and usually it costs a lot of money, or they are under incredible stress during that time. And I've seen it, and I've had people in my office in tears, because they need whatever, $100, they need $60 to pay their electric bill or pay the babysitter, so it's really reducing stress for people. And I think it's amazing that you are doing this even at no charge at all. And I know you worked with a bank to get some really good rates. So thank you. Yeah. And we've got some comments here. So great to help people get money for their work right away. Thank you. Do you have any other services you offer to help people manage their finances, or something their employers could offer?
Absolutely. That is a great question. We do, but because of the fact that we're giving people early access to their pay, we feel called and led to make sure they have guardrails. So two things. One, we work with employers to set thresholds. We have some caps. We don't like to offer more than 4 transactions in any one biweekly pay period. We don't ever offer more than 50% of their pay, because we talk a lot about smoothing out income peaks and valleys, not inverting them, right? We still want them to get a paycheck. And we also know with taxes, withholdings, things of that nature, if you go over 50%, you start to kind of play in a gray area. So we never go higher than 50%. Some of our customers say, I want to make 20% available, and I don't want them to have more than 1 transaction per pay period. And so we go in and strategically align with an employer to say, what makes the most sense for your team? Every team is different, and geographically, industry wise, you name it, every team is different. And so for us to go in and kind of say, here's this box and here's where your team fits, it just doesn't make sense for us to go. You tell us, and we'll configure it to make the most sense. And so we do put guardrails in place that are employer furnished. Now, the second piece of that is if we're going to give them access, we want to give them some additional materials that help them make better decisions. So we have about 35 or 40 financial education and literacy documents inside the Immediate app, where people can go read about budgeting 101. Somebody the other day said, is there anything about credit cards? And I said, yeah, there's an article that says how to use credit cards wisely. And they're like, oh, and I said, yeah, it's really short. It just says, don't do it. So, but there's a lot in there. And then we also give them about 20 different financial calculators, where I can go plug in my income and starts to create a cash flow calculator of what I could be saving. If I do have credit card debt, how much over the minimum do I need to pay to shorten the term on getting this paid off? Really trying to give literacy and educational materials to our community that they can leverage to make better decisions. And over the past 2 months, we've seen a major spike in usage of those, which has been encouraging.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. And now that, we've talked a little bit about this, that, that you've seen, I think you said a 40% increase in people accessing their money before they get paid.
Right.
Since before the pandemic. So that really shows the impact of that. And I want to, and Denise, thanks for bringing up that question. That was a really good question. I want to also have you talk a little bit about, you told us about an organization that had joined and how quickly people started using it. But I also want to point out a comment that what you do, and I don't know if you thought about this, and this is, Chris, thank you for bringing this up, but this opportunity takes the shame out of having to ask for money that you've already earned.
Right.
And wow.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. When we set out down this path, when we kind of made this pivot and we shifted away from scheduling towards, let's go help people give them a responsible alternative to what else is out there. Because the numbers that we didn't know are the numbers that we talked about. The people with less than $400 in savings, 4 out of 5 people living paycheck to paycheck, those were really eye-opening for me. I can tell you, my right out of school, I remember a time when I was driving down the road and a rock popped up and cracked my windshield, and it was a crack right across the driver's side, which means if I get pulled over, I get a ticket for having obstructed view. And the deductible to get my windshield replaced was $500. I didn't have $500. And I was fortunate enough to be able to pick up the phone and call my parents and go, can you pay this and I'll pay you back when I get my next paycheck? And it ended up taking like 2 or 3 paychecks before I carved out enough to pay them back. But I was able to do that.
Yeah.
most people aren't that fortunate, right?
They don't have safety nets. There aren't safety nets for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we viewed this as, we can create a safety net so when someone has an issue that pops up, they don't have to turn to friends and family first. They don't have to go, if their credit score is good enough to get a credit card, they don't have to run up credit card debt. As a country, we collectively, pre-COVID, had over $1 trillion in credit card debt. Now, what the number over the next quarter or so will be, who knows?
Right.
Really higher. The other thing is, you see people writing bad checks. It still happens. It's 2020. People still write bad checks. And I think the NSF fee now is $38. I'm willing to write a check that I know is going to bounce and have to pay a $38 fee because I don't have the money.
Right.
And so if there's $34 billion a year in overdraft fees, so if I don't want to go to one of those, which, believe it or not, are the least predatory, I turn to something like a title loan where I collateralize my car and I can get out money that's 300% APR. Or the worst is the payday loans, where a lot of states, thank goodness, have turned the corner and outlawed that. But states like Alabama, where we're headquartered in Birmingham, 456% APR. Or states like Texas, 662% APR. And those just create cycles of debt that people can't break.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I really, and I want to go back to, and for those of you I see some more people popping in, those of you who are just joining, we're talking with Matt from Immediate, and Immediate basically, I think I said it right, gives organizations the opportunity to have their team members get paid after they work their shift, rather than having to wait 2 weeks at an extremely affordable, and right now during the pandemic, at no charge. And Chris had brought up the whole point of this. It's doing so much. It's clearly going to save people money, but I was thinking when Chris made that comment that it saves people the shame. Now that she said that, I'm thinking back to those people that came into my office, and I'm thinking about somebody who worked in our housekeeping department, and just how awful it must have been to have to come in and talk to your boss and say, and beg, can I get a payday advance because I need to pay this bill? So it provides people with a lot more dignity, which is awesome, and control over their own lives, right? Autonomy. We talk about the Eden alternative domains of well-being, and how many places this really can impact well-being. So that's amazing. So talk a little bit. So organizations, how does it work? If somebody is either watching this live or they're watching the recording of this later, and they say, how does this work? Like, what happens? So I run a retirement community, and I was to work with you. What happens next?
Yeah, so the way that it works is really straightforward. We build connections to time tracking and payroll systems. And that's what allows us to not be viewed and regulated as a lender, because we can validate that at the end of a shift, someone has earned an amount of money. And so the way that it works in the simplest terms is, on a weekly basis, we receive a personnel file that shows an employee ID and their hourly rate. We match that up with a daily feed that we receive from the time tracking system that shows that same employee ID and then shows the number of hours that they've worked since the last payday. We match those up in our platform, and a user goes in, they log into the Immediate app, and they can see how much money they've earned gross since the last payday. And then based off of the thresholds that you as an employer set, they've got a percentage of that that's available to them to transfer. And so if I go in and say, well, I need $100, and they select that, they have the ability to move it into a bank account or onto a loadable debit card. And they simply select the amount, click transfer. And what we as a company do is we actually fund their account. So if somebody requested $100, we put $100 into their bank account. And then when you're submitting your next payroll, prior to sending that off to your payroll company, we send a report back that essentially creates a line item deduction from their paycheck. The same way as health insurance or 401k, et cetera. There's going to be a line item that says Immediate, and there's $100. And it's removed from their gross pay, and we receive a reimbursement for that $100. So
okay. And so Denise had asked a question, is this something like, does the employee have to work with their employer to make this happen? If the employer has it, then if I work someplace that has this, I can pull it up on my app and just do it. I don't have to talk to my boss. Exactly. Nobody has to know, right?
As you're exactly right, Jill. So as part of the onboarding, we have the employer send something out to all of your employees that says, hey, be on the lookout. We've partnered with this company. It's a voluntary financial wellness benefit, and you'll receive an email with an activation code. And so that activation code is individualized, and it ties them back to that individual employer so we can get their time tracking and payroll data. From there on, there is no interaction with the employer for that user. They don't have to go in and ask for anything. They simply go in and request the amount of money that they need and transfer it, and then everything is automated on the back end.
That's awesome. And so it all works through the payroll system. So like the HR person isn't having to do a bunch of back and forth. It's like every payday that.
Correct. So we spend time during onboarding. We usually recommend about 3 to 4 weeks between the time that we execute a partnership agreement with that employer and the time that we actually go live. It's to go through, we do a kickoff call with your team to make sure that we configure everything the right way, that you tell us what thresholds you want. We set everything up. And then when you're ready to go live, we do another call with your HR team to make sure that we're putting together all the right announcement materials and who it's going to go to and all of those things. Some groups want to kind of stagger rollouts. We have one post-acute organization that has a home health division and senior living communities. And so they kind of staggered which communities got it first and kind of rolled it out like that. And so we just put all those things together as part of the process. And then once it's out, everything is automated on the back end. So your HR and payroll team don't have to go in and manually enter things. It really was important for us to make this as smooth of a process, not only for those who are receiving the funds, but also for the organization to provide this as a benefit.
Yeah, because they don't need anything more to do, right? Exactly. And that actually, and I think you told me you can do it in like 2 weeks if they have the payroll system that you're already set up with.
Yeah, we've done it in as little as 2 weeks, and my customer success team might kick me under the table if I said that we always can do it in 2 weeks, but because they did a lot of hard work over the weekends getting ready. That was about a 1,500 employee company that we got ready and went to roll this out to all their team in 2 weeks. You kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. This particular group has 13 locations, and they called me on a Thursday, and we've been talking for a few weeks, and they called me on a Thursday and said, if we were to sign a contract tomorrow, could you have us live in 2 weeks? And I said, sure, of course we can. And I hang up the phone and I called our team and I said, hey, and they said, you really should ask us before you say yeah.
I hear that from my team a lot too.
Right, yeah, I go, hey, I just want to challenge you, and I know you can do it. And sure enough, they did it, and we were able to. And the need that was there, and this is what they were seeing was, this was right as the pandemic was starting to spread in the States, and they said there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of people that are concerned, and we're seeing shift cancellations spike. And when shift cancellations spike, when we're taking care of our aging population, it hurts continuity of care. And in the long run, it can create major impact, right? And so they said, we need something quickly that could give them an incentive outside of us going in and saying, hey, we'll just pay you more money, right? And so we rolled this out really quickly. We usually see in the first month post go live, we usually see about 8 to 10% adoption. And that number grows, it usually plateaus around the low 20% after about a quarter worth of using. It's people talking and sharing that they've actually used it and that it worked and all those things, right? So typically 8 to 10% in the first month. With this particular group, in the first 7 days, we had 17% adoption.
Wow.
And it was just really, really incredible to see how quickly people grabbed it and took a hold of it. And I don't want to say take advantage of it in a negative way, but take advantage of the fact that I now have access to something that I didn't previously. And I think that's been really, really impactful. And their organization has told us that spike we saw on shift cancellations leveled off. And people were coming in, and no, we still had to make some adjustments. There were some people who weren't as happy, but they were giving us more heads up, and we had more people that were willing to come in. And we've even seen with some groups what they've called, I'm trying to think of what they called it, like a COVID response team. I think they had basically where they were pulling people in from other organizations, and they're having to add to their team to have people that fill in. And so they're coming in, and part of the way that they're recruiting them is by saying, hey, you can work today, get paid tomorrow if you come.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
That is. And especially, if they're bringing in people that haven't been working for a while. So, bank accounts completely depleted.
Right.
That's an incredible thing. So Denise popped up a question. If you have data on how is this improving retention? Have you studied that yet?
We have. So we've seen a lot, and due to the pandemic, we really like to see a full 12 months worth of data to show. And so we've got some early customers that we can show some retention. This is going to throw off our numbers, of course, the past 2 months. Our first senior living went live in last fall. So we unfortunately don't have 12 months worth of senior living to show retention. Stick with us, we'll show you. But we are seeing that and anecdotally, just from the conversations we're having with CFOs and heads of HR, like this is something that if I'm going to leave now, where I'm leaving this benefit, I'm going somewhere else where I don't have that option. It's much more negative looking at something else. And so they are saying that they've seen a reduction in turnover, but it's not something where I can say, hey, look, in the 12 months prior to using us, it was X and now it's Y, but we'll have that shortly. Again, there's going to be a little bit of an asterisk by it because of the pandemic, but I think there's gonna be asterisks for 2020 on every document.
And they won't be little ones; they'll be big asterisks.
Right.
So one of the things I had asked you, and this is where I just really enjoyed talking with you with your leadership kind of philosophy and insights, is we were talking about, and because every organization that is working with any kind of customers or clients that are being impacted by this, which is everyone, the senior living field, more than any, really, other than hospitals, with just everything they're dealing with, is that leaders have the potential to say, and I probably would have said this if I was, an administrator right now, because it's tough times, is Matt, this sounds awesome. I can't. I don't have the space. I have so much going on. And you said something to me that was really interesting, and I hope you'll share it with people. And it was about the story Jim Collins, the book Good to Great, told about the Stockton paradox.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just so interesting. And I've been thinking a lot about that. Will you talk a little bit about it?
Sure. You're right. I mean, it really is. And as an entrepreneur, business owner, we're struggling with things too, right? We had to switch to a work from home where we had a guy who his first day was literally the day that we switched to work from home, and so it's been something where we've tried to navigate these waters of how do you create an environment and a culture where we're doing Zoom calls and all these things, and you get so caught up in the day to day. And one of my investors sent me a short YouTube video, to your point, from Jim Collins, and it was a story about it's the as you mentioned, the Stockdale paradox, and it's about a guy named Admiral Jim Stockdale, and he was I think it was the most senior ranking prisoner of war during the Vietnam War. And he was held in captivity for 8 years. And he obviously survived. And afterwards, he wrote a book. I'm blanking on the name of it. I want to say, but it was really interesting. It was it was written in a way where he wrote a chapter and then his wife wrote a chapter. And I think it was like Love and War. And where, so he's talking about, here's what I was going through in July 1958. And then she's writing, here's what I was going through in July 1958. And I'm struggling with, is my husband still alive? Is, and so there's very different feels, but you kind of start reading and it's really bleak, right? Even knowing the outcome, you read some of these things, you go, gosh, that was tough. I can't imagine. And so we find ourselves today in a time of uncertainty that we have not experienced, right? There may be some people that are still alive that might have been infants when we went through the 1918 Spanish influenza that could probably felt something somewhere. But for us, by and large, none of us have experienced anything like this, particularly in America. And so the Stockdale paradox, essentially what Jim Collins said when he was interviewing Admiral Stockdale, he said, how did you get through those 8 years of captivity? And he said, I learned and I convinced myself that when I come out the other end of it, and I will, when I come out the other end of this, I'm going to look back and say, this was a defining point in my life. And this was something that every day moving forward, I'm going to gather strength from. Now, I still have things to deal with today, right? Like, you're a prisoner of war. At any point, somebody could walk in and grab you out of your cell and go torture you. And I knew that I was going to have to deal with that when that came. But while I'm in the midst of it, I'm going to buy in, not in a fantasy optimism way of, oh man, everything's going to be fine, right? Because one of the things that he said was, who didn't come out the other side? Well, he said the optimists, the people who kept going, by Christmas, I'm going home. Christmas comes and goes and they don't go home. They go, maybe by Independence Day I'll go home. And then Independence Day comes and goes and they don't go home. And he says, what happened to them? They were brokenhearted and they never got over it. And so when you take that in very different circumstances, right? Like, I want to be clear, like me being trapped at home with my 3 beautiful daughters and my beautiful wife and really getting to rekindle those relationships. That's something that I do not take for granted. And I hope most people don't. But I also think that these difficult times that we're going through, I think in 12 months, 24 months, 60 months, we're going to look back and we're going to go, this country and this world is better off because of the things that we learned and the things that we figured out that we could do during these really bleak moments. So even in the midst of hardship and even in the midst of all the brutal realities of today, we have to take a minute to take a step back and think about, what is life going to be on the other side? And how can what are the things that I can control today? There's a lot of things I can't control, right? But what are the things that I can control today to prepare for that? And that's the conversation that we've had internally, and that, quite frankly, we've had with some organizations that we've been in discussions with of, look, from a consultative perspective, you as a business owner, you as an HR person that's managing a big team of individuals, how do we prepare for the next step, whenever that is, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's next month or it's 3 months from now, whenever it is, how do we do things today to start preparing for that, and then to help our team get their feet under them when we come out the other side?
Yeah, I love that. I love that, and I do want to recognize, as you just did, just the challenges that people are going through, and it's hard,
right? Absolutely.
And there's and that's what we're doing with Eden Alternative too, is what are we going to learn right now? How will we come through this and be better? It's hard to say that right now,
right?
But to be better because of this. So Matt, I note that the book In Love and War by Jim Stockdale, there's in the comment section if anybody wants to know that book. And then we had a comment from South Africa. Research says that the long-term care sector globally has a 40 to 100% staff turnover rate. Interesting that the number one reason employees leave is a lack of respect. Isn't that true?
Well,
yeah. So Matt, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure people heard today?
I mean, I think we've covered a lot of it. My parting thought would be just to kind of go back to the start, right? Is we really view ourselves, as an organization, and are mission driven to provide people a responsible way to access their earnings. And we internally, we don't share a whole lot of this externally, as I say on a webinar with a lot of people listening in. But our mission and what we talk about in my team, if they're watching or if they watch this on video, they're going to go, there he goes again. This is what I talk about all the time is we are on path. And our goal and mission is to positively impact the financial well-being of millions of Americans. And that doesn't mean I'm not sitting here saying that in 6 months or 2 years we're going to have 1 million people using this. I know that for every American there are multiple Americans tied to them, right? And as we continue to grow, and I know we talked about this a little bit, we have international plans in the future. Today we're just in the States, but we are evaluating and looking at some other things. So there's 7 billion people in this world, and for every individual that is employed, there's people tied to them. And right now, people are feeling that because they're going, "Hey, I'm married and my job is fine, right? But my wife or my husband, they may have gotten let go, and there's an impact to our household income." And that means that there's not as much money to put food on the table for these children, or to take care of this aging family member, or whatever it may be. So we are mission driven to help people, one, responsibly access their own money. So two, they can break these cycles of debt that these predatory lenders are creating across the country and across the world. And so we really are driven by making an impact in people's lives. And that's what we do. We refer to it as our immediate community, right? We don't just go, yeah, they're customers.
Yep.
Yeah, they're users. We say you're part of this community, and we're here to help. We're here to help you make better financial decisions. We're here to help you responsibly access capital, and we're here to guide you and lead you in ways to help you out in the future, which I think is really important.
It is, and we love your mission, and we are thrilled to have Immediate as an Eden Alternative Value-Added Partner. And if you're interested, you can visit joinimmediate.com to learn more. And for those of you who are part of our Eden Alternative Registry, you'll be getting some information from Immediate. Within, I think, a couple of weeks, we're going to be sending out some information. Matt, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, for your work, for your mission, and for being with us today. Looking forward to having a long partnership with you all. And for those of you out there, next week on our show, our Eden Alternative Live show, Monday, we have, and that would be Monday, May 4th, I believe. Is that right? May 4th, I think. At 1 o'clock Eastern time, 11 o'clock Mountain time, we have Jack York from It's Never Too Late and Angie McAllister from Signature Healthcare. And any of you who know Jack and or Angie, you know this will be a very lively and fun show. And then next Wednesday, we have Bob Kramer, who is the founder and president of Nexus Insights, and also founded Nick and is a strategic advisor to them. And we're going to be talking really kind of big picture about what's the future of aging and what will we learn from this pandemic that will help us. Again, it's kind of like that Stockton paradox. And what we were talking about with Matt is how do we come out of this having learned something and do better? So Matt, again, thank you. There is a quick question here. Do you only work through organizations, or do you work with individuals too?
We do have to go through an organization in order to validate time worked and write back into payroll software. So we do require a partnership with the employers today.
Thank you. And I do want to read a quick quote that Chris put in, and this must be from the book. This is a very important lesson. You must never confuse faith, that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be.
Awesome.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Matt, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate being here and appreciate everybody joining in with us today.